Hello, and welcome to the last Power Hour of 2024, brought to you in partnership with Huler. The focus of it being on well-being. For those that don't know me, I'm Matt Manners, founder and CEO of the Inspiring Workplaces Group, and it's great to be here with you today. Been quite a long day already, but I'm really excited for what we've got in store. Before we dive into what's bound to be an eye-opening session, a couple of updates. First, we had lined up the brilliant Tara Furiani, CEO of the Not the HR Lady, for a no-holds-barred session titled Under Pressure, Balancing Work, Family and Wellbeing in High-Stress Environments, which I was really looking forward to, as I'm sure a lot of you were too. But life is full of twists, isn't it? So Tara is sadly stuck in a hurricane zone right now. And her Wi-Fi, well, it's about as reliable as you'd expect it to be in a hurricane zone. But fear not, we're going to get her back next year when the storm has well and truly passed. So sending nothing but love and best wishes to Tara right now. Let's talk about the elephant in the room as well, I guess. Let's talk about the US election. Tens of millions of people have voted, and around half the country and probably the world is feeling something between hopeful, furious, or exhausted. Many different emotions. At Inspiring Workplaces, we're not here to get political. We want to change the world through the world of work. And we do that by encouraging safe, people-first cultures where everyone feels they can belong and perform at their best. So with that in mind, we thought a bit of guidance might be helpful. And there's been plenty of posts on LinkedIn along these lines, which I think is a great resource for stuff like that. So we thought it's a bit of guidance that'll be helpful for all of us as we navigate the next few days, weeks, and any other time an outside event, which there seem to be lots of them, throw a serious curveball into our workplace culture. So just a few here, and I hope they're helpful. So firstly, give people space. Deadlines are important, work's important, but let's face it, so's keeping your team grounded and sane. Let's ease up where we can and allow people room to process and breathe. And I stress you do that day in, day out anyway, because we all have life's troubles that impact us on a day-to-day basis. Encourage open dialogue respectfully. Again, something I'd encourage you to do daily, but now's the time to remember empathy isn't optional. Encourage your teams to talk, but with a foundation of respect. Provide access to support resources that I'm sure you have a lot of. Remind your people about mental health resources. Consider optional sessions with counsellors or experts, because some people just might need a little bit more extra support to weather the storm in their world. Foster inclusivity and respect your views. This should go without saying, but we don't all have to agree to get along. Make sure everyone knows this, and it's an environment where respect comes first. Encourage flexibility and personal time. Give your people the option to take some time, process outcomes, and take a breather if they need it. A mental health day, or whatever you want to call it. When I lived in Australia, they were called Doona days. But that could now be worth a week of productivity later, and just the right thing to do. And, again, something that if you keep this as your North Star will keep you in good stead, but focus on common goals and values. No matter what's going on outside, bring it back to the basics. Remind everyone why we're here, what we're working towards, and keep the focus on our shared goals. Highlight wins, big and small, and keep that spirit of unity alive. Even though we're based in the UK, that's exactly what I did this morning, both internally and externally. So by giving people the support they need, fostering respect and reminding everyone that we're all on the same team and we'll get through this together, we're creating the kind of culture that can weather any storm, election or otherwise. And I hope they were helpful. And like I say, no agenda, just trying to help people out there. So back to why we're all here, and really excited. Or kind of always leave the best till last, I guess. So last Power Hour of 2024, and as I said, it's in partnership with Huler. And our first speaker is Dr. Tracy Brower, PhD sociologist studying happiness, work-life fulfillment, and the future of work. She's the author of The Secrets to Happiness at Work and Bring Your Work to Life. She's the Vice President of Workplace Insights with Steelcase and a senior contributor to the likes of Forbes and Fast Company. Awesome. Her work has been translated into 22 languages, and you can find her on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, or at tracybrower.com. Her talk today now could be extremely timely and is titled, It's Not What You Think, Surprising Research on Stress and Wellbeing. Stress is on the rise, and people are reporting record levels of burnout, anxiety, and malaise. And while we usually think of stress as purely negative, in actuality, it can be positive, motivating, and constructive in the right amounts at the right times. Tracy is going to discuss this research, the nuances, and the recommendations for dealing with negative aspects of stress and harnessing the positive elements to create the conditions for happiness, well-being, and thriving. Please welcome Tracy. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and love your introduction. Really, really helpful information.
Well, thank you. At least there was one that like it. So no, but like I said, people are here to hear you, not me. So I'm going to exit stage left and I will be back after you've done your thing. So have fun.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for having me. And I think we're going to be bringing up some slides. Yeah. There's a lot going on, and it's a good moment to take a deep breath and be able to talk about how we move forward in a really constructive, productive way, you all. So here's my information. If you want to look me up, there's a link to LinkedIn, and you can let me know how you're thinking about this topic. I think we'll have a wonderful opportunity for dialogue and conversation as well. So first of all, I always like to start with kind of where are we? And we are a stressed out bunch of people globally. People are demotivated. People report they are stressed. 50% of people globally are lonely. Large numbers of people report that they don't feel connected with their coworkers. And there is a brand new study that 88 to 61% of people globally are fearful. They're fearful about information war, climate change, nuclear war, geopolitical issues, inflation, losing their job. There is a lot of fear around. And that means that people are coming into the workplace and showing up with levels of depression and anxiety that are at record levels. 98% of Gen Zs report that they feel burned out. I mean, I don't know what 98% of people agree on other than this, right? So the really critical thing, I think, is for us to understand where we are. I always see if you're going to go for a hike, you want to know the terrain and you want to know if it's rained recently and you want to know the elevations and you want to know what the weather is going to be so you know which footwear to wear and how much water to take along. And this is like that. Understanding where we are helps us go forward in a constructive and productive way. But here's the other thing. All of this kind of context, our VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, mean that we have a wonderful opportunity in terms of work and the workplace. Work can be a center of gravity. Work can be a source of continuity. Our connections with other people can be a source of support. And so we have a wonderful opportunity to influence and to create the context, not only for happiness and joy and fulfillment, but for well-being as well. And Matt, I love the work that you're doing. Change the world through the world of work. I think we can do that. And I think we have a wonderful opportunity to influence well-being. So here are 3 ways that we can think about well-being and understand how we can create the conditions for well-being and change our perspectives on well-being as well in some cases. So the first thing we can do is understand and reframe how we think about stress. So of course there is stress that is stressful. Of course there is stress that kind of puts us in a bad place or causes us to really tap into our best coping mechanisms. But not all stress is bad, interestingly. There's a Goldilocks rule of stress. You all know the story of Goldilocks, right? She's the little girl hiking through the woods, and she comes upon a cabin that's owned by 3 bears, and the 3 bears are away picking berries, and she goes in and, looks at the porridge, and some of it's too hot, and some of it's too cold, and some of it's just right. And she sits in the chair, and one chair is too soft, and one is too hard, and one is just right. The interesting thing about Goldilocks is she's looking for the just right fit. And that is true of stress as well. There is a just right level of stress. And that's what that parabola curve is meant to convey. If we don't have enough stress, if we're just kind of sitting around and there's no reason to get off of the couch, we can feel depressed and anxious and disoriented even. On the other hand, if we've got too much stress, we can feel depressed and anxious and disoriented. But at a just right level of stress, it's known as eustress, where we have challenges that are constructive, we have things to do, we have an impact to make, we feel a level of vitality, both in terms of what we can do and how we can influence. There's a wonderful saying that the happiest people have someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. And I think that's about eustress, right? All the hard things can be really rewarding. Family relationships and accomplishments at work and things that we're able to accomplish in our community. Here's something else to know. We all know about PTSD, of course, and it's chronic and serious, and we need to absolutely offer support and empathy in every way that we can. There is also something called post-traumatic growth, which is actually a thing. It is when we go through something really hard and really traumatic, and we come out on the other side with growth. 3 things happen. We learn who we can count on, who our people really are, who will stay with us. We learn about our capabilities, like what can we really accomplish and get through even though we didn't know we could. And we learn about our priorities, what really matters the most. And so we can think about kind of positive aspects of stress and opportunities to kind of seek stress that is constructive and productive, the right kinds of stress and the right kinds of challenge. The paradox of challenge is that when you work harder for something, you tend to feel better about it when you accomplish it. There's actual academic research on this. It's called the IKEA effect, because you know how you go to IKEA and you get the box that's like really, really small with all the pieces and parts, and you have to accomplish putting the thing together, and then you do it and you're like, oh, it's the most beautiful piece I've ever seen. I worked so hard for this. That is true of many things in our life. When we work really, really hard, we tend to feel really good about that accomplishment. And you think about it, a lot of the hardest things are the best things. Like you work hard to have great relationships with your partner. You work hard to be a great parent and feel good about your relationships with children or nieces or nephews. You work really hard to accomplish something at work that's been absolutely making you sweat, literally and figuratively. And when you come out on the other side, you've learned a ton and you feel really good about that accomplishment. So we can understand and reframe stress in some really important ways for our well-being. Here are the implications. Harness your thoughts. Linguistic determinism says that how we think about things can shape and how we talk to ourselves about things can shape how we feel about things. So we don't have to do something necessarily, but we get to do something. It was a really hard thing, but we learned a lot from it, we can tell ourselves. And so how we think about things really does matter to our well-being, and we can use our words. Do you ever hear this? You know, we talk to children and say, use your words. We can say the same thing to ourselves, you all. So there's an opportunity to understand and reframe. And the workplace can help us do this. The workplace can give us opportunities for challenge when we're working together with our team members. The workplace can give us the opportunity to be reminded when we see each other across the neighborhood how our work matters to other people. So there's a role to play in terms of work and workplace for sure. All right. The next thing we want to talk about is how you can build your resistance as it relates to well-being. Sorry, not resistance, resilience. Resistance to hard things, resilience for great things. All right, here is something cool, you all. The 15% rule is actually academically based. It says that when you fail 15% of the time, it will be the most motivating kind of situation. If you fail more than 15% of the time, you might say to yourself, ugh, maybe I'm not cut out for this one. I would have loved to have been a professional ballet dancer, but it's just not in me. On the other hand, if you fail less than 15% of the time, you might conclude that you kind of have this one taken care of and you're going to go on to the next great challenge. The takeaway message is that when we set ourselves up for stretch, for pushing ourselves, for leaning in, we may fail sometimes, but that may not be a bad thing because it can keep us coming back and keep us stretching. Stretch is also correlated with happiness. Of course, you need, the mellow things that you do now and then. Of course, you need the relaxation. Of course, you need the self-care. But also, when we push ourselves, when we are trying new things, when we're pushing out of our comfort zones, that is actually super correlated with happiness and fulfillment. Here's something else. There is wonderful research on thriving. It tends to come out of elite athletes and it tends to come out of the child development literature. Thriving is two things. First of all, it's hitting your personal best. You ran the sprint at your personal best record time. I don't know, you played your personal best pickleball match. God forbid, that's a harder game than you think, for me anyway. And the other thing about thriving, in addition to your personal best, is that it is always about striving for what's next. Oh my gosh, I did my personal best in the sprint. Where am I going to go next? How much better can I make my time? So striving and thriving have a lot to do with each other. Pushing ourselves, stretching is really good for well-being. If you're not failing sometimes, you're maybe not trying hard enough. So awesome perspective. There are lots of different kinds of challenge as well. You can learn a new language, you can climb a mountain, you can do a tough rock, you can do things that are physically demanding, you can do artwork that absolutely stretches your capabilities. Maybe you're learning how to sculpt or paint. There are lots of different kinds of challenges that you can look for. And stretching anywhere will help you stretch everywhere. So another sort of unappreciated element of stress is the extent to which it can be helpful when we seek it and when we find challenging opportunities. Stretching anywhere helps you stretch everywhere, as I said. All right, so here are the implications of this one. Set your sights high. You want to look for work that is inspiring for you. Find people at work from whom you can learn and to whom you can offer support. Spend time in work experiences that offer you the opportunity for learning from other people, whether those be virtual or face-to-face, and seek challenges in all kinds of parts of your life. Raise your hand for that next opportunity at work. Take initiative. Find the problem that you can make a difference in. All of those kinds of things are super good for your happiness, your fulfillment, your self-esteem, and for your well-being. All right, third way that we can think about stress and well-being a little bit differently is to focus on connecting and caring. And this is especially relevant to your conversation earlier, Matt. We can care for others, and that is super relevant in terms of our happiness, fulfillment, and well-being. It is a myth that it's a great idea to focus on how to be happier all the time. If we're focused on how to be happier all the time as its own end, we tend to not be as happy for two reasons. First of all, we're focused on what we don't have, therefore, why are we pursuing something else? but we also tend to be more focused on ourselves, and that's negatively correlated with happiness. More positively correlated with well-being and happiness is focusing on others. How can we make a difference? How can we support? How can we contribute? If you are depressed or anxious, your peripheral vision physiologically literally narrows. It's an instinctual response. You're going to find the tree where you can run away from the saber-toothed tiger. You're going to look for the prey to support your family and feed your family. Your vision tends to narrow when you feel under threat or depressed or anxious. And so caring for others expands that perspective. It kind of gets us out of our own heads. And so when we focus on others, it's really good for our well-being. You can also consider the benefits of obligation and responsibility. Sometimes we say, oh, it's too much to be obligated to others, but it's actually really good for our well-being when we feel like we matter, when we feel like we can support, when we feel like we can make a contribution. And interestingly, there's wonderful research out of Brigham Young University that if you have 2 or 3 close friends, it is more important to your health outcomes than diet, exercise, or drinking, and on par with smoking. Even if you're an introvert, we all need solid relationships with at least a few people. It absolutely contributes to our health in terms of longevity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, depression, anxiety, and even dementia. There's academic research linking these. So one of the elements of well-being is creating great relationships and caring for others. Another element of well-being is, of course, caring for yourself. And I think we can reimagine self-care because there's some popular press that says, for self-care, you gotta, drink a glass of wine and have a bubble bath every day. But it's really more than that, right? Because those may not be the right choices for you. They may not be the things that nurture you. Instead, we can think about making really intentional choices about how we care for ourselves. It may be slowing down, but for some of us, it may actually be speeding up. It may be saying no, but it may also be saying yes. Statistically, if you say yes and engage in things that energize you, you will perceive that you have more time. So do the things that energize you. That can be an element of self-care. Sometimes it's about being alone, but sometimes it's also about being together with people that nurture you and energize you. And you can invest in experiences and memories. Those are much more correlated with happiness and self-care. Of course, if you need the new shoes or the new sofa, have at it. But also when we invest in experiences, that's really good for us. So the implication here is focus on giving and do what works for you and be intentional about that. So these are your takeaways. You can think about your thinking and harness your thoughts and use your words. You can set your sights high and look for challenge and look for opportunities to stretch. And you can focus on both giving to others and supporting yourself. So new ways to think about some of the positives of stress, some of the positives of challenge, and certainly some of the ways that we can create the conditions for our own well-being. Growth doesn't happen without discomfort, and we have lots of discomfort these days. So go team. Here we go in terms of our well-being. Thanks you all. Look me up if you want, and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Not what I was quite expecting actually, which is always a great thing, I think. And so many questions, comments that I'm going to save for the conversation afterwards and hopefully let my brain process them. There's so much in there. Absolutely fantastic, Tracy. Thank you so much. We'll speak to you shortly. So without further ado, let's get straight on to our next storyteller and then get back for our conversation a little bit later. Our next storyteller is Suzi Archer, Director of Customer and Employee Experience at Huler. Driven by the belief that happy employees lead to happy customers, Suzi has a deep passion for aligning these two critical aspects. Again, something that we highly believe in too. Her creative approach to people operations has transformed Huler's employee experience, fostering a personalized, award-winning culture that fuels engagement, productivity, and profitability In fact, Huler has been named an inspiring workplace, no less, 2 years running. So a great achievement. In today's rapidly evolving work environment, technology is not just a tool for productivity, it's a key player in shaping employee well-being. This talk from Suzi will delve into the critical role that worktech plays in promoting healthy workplaces and enhancing the overall well-being of employees. As the boundaries between work and personal life continue to blur, if there are even any boundaries right now, the technology we use at work significantly influences our experience and satisfaction on the job. So please welcome to the Power Hour, Suzi. Hello.
Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. I'm going to be honest, my well-being just took a very temperamental spike in decline as I accidentally left this whole event by trying to unmute my mic. So happy to have got back just in time.
Well, let's just take a deep breath. You know, I mean, so much stuff happens when it's live. You know, it's so let's just pause for a second. I actually totally turned my computer off just before we went live. I don't know whether you saw that. So yeah, so the mic's nothing. But I'm really looking forward to this talk. And then once you're done, we'll bring you and Tracy back on screen and we'll have a chat. So over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everybody. So good to be here. And Tracy, thank you so much for sharing. There was a lot in that presentation that resonated with me, particularly around that paradox of challenge, but probably from the angle that it shouldn't have from a well-being perspective. Was reflecting that I can be very guilty of that self-reward, working incredibly hard, working extra hours, doing more, getting more done, achieving more, and getting the buzz from that, but without sort of acknowledging the impact that that can have on well-being and those blurred lines between home and work. So definitely a few takeaways that I took from that session. So today in the session, we're going to talk about the impact of work tech on well-being and how we can design healthier workplaces in this digital age that we have found ourselves in. So there's no doubt in recent years that personal tech like smartwatches, health apps has revolutionized how we manage our well-being. We monitor everything from our heart rate to our sleep cycles that provide a ton of useful information and insights that can help encourage a more healthier lifestyle. And even our home tech plays such a key role in that. I made a comment on a LinkedIn post recently about my robo-hoover, Jeffrey. And genuinely, I struggle with anxiety. I'm quite open about talking about it. And when I feel anxious, one of the things that I notice is, and I can find quite triggering, is mess and the state of my home with 3 dogs and 2 kids under 4. And with that beautiful, constantly molting golden retriever that I have, my piece of home tech, Jeffrey, has the ability to just lower my stress levels because I can switch him on. He does his thing and I don't have to watch Albus's little dust bunnies rolling across the floor. So even those pieces of tech that we have in our home in small ways can make such an impact on our well-being. I was going to ask a question, but did not have the time or patience openly after a day today to hook up my YouTube channel. But just as a bit of a thought for you all on making a note of your favorite piece of personal tech and your favorite piece of work tech. And if anybody wants to share those with me, I've got a slide at the end where we can connect on LinkedIn. But clearly there's a huge impact of tech in our home and our personal lives. And so there is an expectation that our work tech, which is essentially that suite of digital tools that help to streamline our work processes and make our lives a little easier inside of work, should hold that same standard in supporting our mental, physical, and emotional well-being. So it's often HR leaders, apologies if anyone can hear now the 3 dogs going slightly nuts in the background, but it's often HR leaders that are tasked with contributing to monitoring, putting initiatives into place that support employee well-being. But it's often HR tech's piece of the puzzle that is quite small in comparison to that wider work tech that you're using across your whole organization. So depending on the size of your organization, if you do have a fairly minimal HR tech stack, that is great. But when you layer in all the other tech your employees and your people are expected to use across work management, email, comms tools, finance systems, CRMs, suddenly there becomes a much wider problem and impact. So whilst HR tend to own well-being, we do need to look much wider than that across the whole business to understand the impact that tech can have on employee well-being. So I wanted to share a bit more of a personal story around sort of that blurred work-life balance. So after I had my beautiful daughter Georgie, who is 4 now, I became very aware of the term mental load, which is described as the cognitive and emotional work that is involved in managing a household, career, and relationships, which was hard enough when I was on maternity leave. When I came back to work, that thought of how am I going to find everything that I've missed in those new systems that have come in or existing systems that might have changed, changes of processes, navigating all of those missed notifications, it just felt super overwhelming. But what I actually came back to was one URL. Now, clearly with my role at Huler, I wasn't going to make it through the whole presentation without mentioning Huler Hub, but I have tried really hard not to do that as overkill. So inside of that URL was a Welcome Back Suzi collection, and collection is a feature inside of Hub, which had everything that I needed in one place. It helped me to phase back in. It allowed me to do that around Georgie, around sleep patterns, all those sorts of things that are slightly harder to navigate with a new baby. Now, clearly that doesn't have to be a collection. Other vendors, other suppliers, other ways of working do exist. But the idea is the same. Instead of having, as an employee, to navigate a ton of different systems, notifications, emails, comms, I had one layer that sat over the top and drastically reduced that mental load and digital noise. And there's loads of different examples of that across the end-to-end employee experience journey, especially around those moments that matter and those moments that can be really difficult, especially around returning to work for whatever reason that might be. Just wanted to pick up quickly on that concept of digital noise. A bit like Tracy said, there are benefits to stress at different points. There are benefits to that elements of constant connectivity, but that can also be totally exhausting. All of those notifications from emails, messaging apps, project management tools, in-tech notifications, they can cause enormous amounts of overwhelm for our people, and that leads to digital exhaustion and burnout. So work tech platforms that can integrate all of those tools, minimize the need for constant app switching or context switching, can help to alleviate some of that burden. And by creating a much more streamlined digital environment, companies can just reduce that digital noise and help employees focus on what matters to them in the time and in the moments that matter to them most. I talked earlier about personal tech. Something that I've talked quite a lot about around sort of those consumer grade experiences and what we can learn from companies who have fantastic customer experiences, the likes of Spotify, Netflix, and how we bring that into the workplace. And the same is relevant for the role of work tech. So that personal tech can help us stay on top of our well-being in ways that were completely unimaginable a decade ago. So now there is an expectation from our people that they want that same level of personalization, ease, and insight from the technology that they're using outside of work as they use inside of work. People just don't want to spend time navigating really clunky systems, sifting through endless emails. They want really seamless, intuitive, personalized experiences that make their workday feel as efficient and as stress-free as managing their health through their personal devices. So inside of work, that can mean adopting platforms that are user-friendly, that can be personalized. When people can do tasks like personalizing their dashboards, quickly accessing the tools, content that they need, and receiving personalized notifications. No more of this, white label, give everybody everything approach. Then they're going to be a lot more engaged and empowered within the workplace. So by bringing in those consumer grade experiences, we can minimize that frustration of dealing with outdated or inefficient systems and helping our teams to focus on much more meaningful work rather than battling that tech that can just feel a little bit like an obstacle sometimes. And just as our people use that personal tech to gain insights into their health, we want to be able to give our employees and be able for them to rely on worktech to offer insights into their productivity and well-being, which just gives them a lot more control over their own work experience. I just wanted to share a few quick tips and actionable tips. The first one I would suggest is really using platforms that integrate tools, all of your tools, and like I said, not just HR tech, work tech, into one place, into one hub to help reduce that digital clutter. We do have a beautiful product that helps with that for anybody who would like to take a peek. But where you can, finding tools that allow your employees to customize their workflows and personalize the tools that they need very easily. That ease of access to information plays a really critical role in reducing stress at work. So bringing everything together into one place and reducing the time that your people are spending finding policies, documents, key resources, remembering logins, all those sorts of things is a super quick win to help reduce some of that frustration. And by making your well-being a priority through the tech you're using, that stops digital solutions being just about efficiency and improving workflows. They should be much around creating a much more supportive workplace. And hopefully it goes without saying, but making sure that any sort of well-being resources, assets that you have are very easily accessible and available. I think it's fantastic when we do spotlight campaigns on things like World Mental Health Day or Mental Health Awareness Week, but actually the chances of one of your team needing to access well-being resources on a day or a week is quite slim. You want them to be able to access that information all year round, and empowering your managers to be able to signpost to those resources when they need them as well. And Matt and I had a really good conversation yesterday on the Inspire Club podcast around that, about the expectations of managers in those blurred lines between home and work and that always on mentality, that there does feel like this go-to of if you need anything, anytime, call me, text me in, whatever time that needs to be. And actually that's not helpful for managers. Managers aren't always equipped to have those sorts of conversations. They're not trained mental health first aiders. They're not financial advisors. Neither should they be. So being able to say inside of work, like, I'm here for you and this is the support that I can offer. And outside of work, this is where you can access and signpost to those resources that can create that impact when it's needed. And just encouraging your teams to make sure that they're taking tech-free breaks and promoting that disconnect during the day as much as possible. And then last up, just asking the right questions. A lot of pulse and engagement surveys that I've seen that we've used at Huler, that I see on behalf of our customers, often feature well-being questions that sound something like, in the last 6 months, I have felt insert emoji here, emotion here, or how is your well-being in general? I don't see many that ask questions around the impact of work tech on well-being, or more of that deep dive into the value each of those systems are bringing to their lives inside of work. So sometimes just reframing some of that and looking at where you can make an impact. Clearly, work has an impact on people's well-being, but often well-being is impacted by a lot more than that outside of work too. So there is a limited circle of control and influence that we have as managers and HR leaders, or whoever owns and should be owning well-being across your organization. That is it from me. So that QR code will link you to a Huler Hub collection. It has the slides that I've shared today, has a couple of different resources linked to inspiring workplaces in each of the speakers' profiles on LinkedIn as well. So would be great to connect. Always happy to have more conversations about all things work tech, wellbeing, employee experience, and the impact that has on a great customer experience. But thank you so much for tuning in, and excited to take some questions with Tracy and Matt.
Thank you very much. Really great talk. Two very different talks. Lots to think about. So the problem with technology is that my handwriting was already really bad, but over the past 2 decades, it's got almost impossible to read myself. So you'll have to bear with me with the notes I've taken. Firstly, let's start with where you started, Suzi. So what's your favourite work tech and personal tech? I'm just quite interested to know, the three of us, what our favourite tech is.
Well, work tech, I think I'd have to say Huler Hub, but genuinely it is, because I don't know how I would do as an EX leader. I just don't know how I would do employee experience without it anymore. So I think clearly that is for us. Like I said, personal tech, Jeffrey the Robo Hoover always gets my top vote. I'd be lost without my Apple Watch, just completely. Or sat nav in my car actually is probably the other one. Like I'm terrible at navigating at the best of times, but I think I would be completely lost without that. But my kids would probably say Alexa for all of the funny things they can ask her to do.
Fantastic. And you, Tracy?
That's a really good question. I love my Audible app and the ability to listen back and forth on my commute. I learn so much all the time. You know, when I'm doing laundry, I'm listening to Audible. When I'm commuting, I'm listening to Audible. So I think about that as work tech. And then this is going to sound really, really, really pedestrian, but you know, we text as a family all the time. We've got a family group chat. And so personally, like, it's a really, really important way that we stay connected. I know it just sounds so ordinary and so like blah, but it really matters in terms of staying connected in meaningful ways. We FaceTime once a week, so that's great. But in the meantime, we're, you know, always in touch.
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Mine's probably just thinking on the fly. ChatGPT is quite handy now, I have to say. And apparently there's one coming that's 100 times more powerful than the latest iteration. So who knows what that's going to be able to do. And personal tech, I'm kind of like, I'm not becoming a Luddite, but I love my iPhone and everything that's on it. So the Audible app, or like, you know, sat nav, or but I hate the fact I'm always looking at it. So, you know, so I've deleted social media off there the past couple of years, and that's been really helpful. But so I would probably go iTunes, and if I had to use a Walkman again, I could easily happily just have an Walkman. So and go full reverse tech. So no, thanks for sharing on that. Keeping with the tech theme, because we've got plenty of time actually, and talking about digital noise, personal work tech. I just wanted both your view on things that have happened around the world and gaining some momentum around the right to switch off. So it's law in some countries like France, Australia. So where's your view on the right to be able to switch off from work? And whoever wants to jump in first.
Tracy,
I have go ahead, Suzi. Go ahead. You probably think tons about this.
Oh no, I was I think everybody has the right to switch off in the way that works for them. So I've seen lots of different examples of, oh, well, you know, we'll just force everyone to switch off at 5 or whatever that might be. But it's not flexible and personalized. So I think everyone has the right to switch off. And I think it should be an organization's role to empower that in the best way that they can for their people, but recognizing that there is no one size fits all and everybody is different. So I think there's balance in that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking I was going to say something provocational, but maybe it's less provocational. I actually think it's really, really important that people have their own right to choose and their own ability to personalize. And I think we can use tools like scheduled delivery of an email. And I think it's critical that we have cultures where even if you receive an email from me at, off hours, you don't feel like you have to respond to it. But I know not all cultures are super respectful that way, or not all cultures behave in that way, even if they're respectful cultures. But I think at the end of the day, it's less about like mandating, you must turn off, you may not send an email at this time. And it needs to be more about letting people personalize and adjust, I think some of us have a more compartmentalized view of work life. When I'm off at 5, I'm off at 5. And others have a more sort of porous view, and that is easier for them. Like I leave work and go to the soccer game in the afternoon, and I turn back on when the kids are in bed, and that works really well. Or, oh my gosh, I have great circadian rhythms and energy early in the morning, but whoa, not so much later in the day. So I think we have to be really careful about letting people personalize and customize what works for them, and have cultures that allow us to set those boundaries based on what our particular needs are, and the needs to, be responsible for our teams and our jobs and our outcomes. It's that important balance.
Well, you've both said it. My favorite word in the English language is balance. I think that's a really, really important word in everything in life. So, and I really agree with everything you've both said. I think culturally, around the world, we're very different as well. So being an Englishman, I've lived and worked in America, which is again very different to being here. And Australia was very different to what I was expecting, because worked harder. Have never worked harder in my life than working in Australia. But the moment you walked out of that office door, when we went to the office, you did not talk about work. English people constantly talk about work. So it was that switching off moment. So really interesting. And I think we just, I suppose, kind of create guardrails and responsible environments to allow people to find their way of working. Because like you say, my best time is 5 a.m. So if somebody stopped me working at 5 a.m., they're not going to get the best out of me. So that's if you wanted me to work at 7 p.m., you're going to get nothing out of me. So, moving to the stuff you were talking about, the amazing gold that you were talking about, Tracy. I guess I loved, if you're not failing sometime, you're not trying hard enough. And one of the great things that we've seen coming out of inspiring workplaces and amazing leaders and organizations is you often hear people anecdotally saying, my leader, my boss gave me permission to fail fast and fail often. How would you go about creating that? Because obviously failure is synonymous with negativity, like you say. So being able to say failure is a good thing, where's that balance? How can you help people go into their organization and say, help me fail?
Yeah, really. Well, I think it's partly about language and framing, right? Like, help me stretch, let me give you an opportunity to try something new. I think one of the things we can do is promote people when they're 70% of the way ready, right? Because then they're staying in their role and staying excited. I think we can give people opportunities that are adjacent to where they're working today that they're really interested in, not overloading them inappropriately, but giving people opportunities to contribute in ways that are slightly beyond where they are today and where they want to be. I think we need to make room in organizations for yellows and reds. You know how we show up in the weekly status meeting and we have to have everything green on the dashboard. Everything green on the dashboard might mean that we're not pushing hard enough, or that we don't dare say what's not going well. But if we allow for yellows and reds, it allows us to think about, hey, where do you need help? Hey, what can we do differently? Hey, what are the systems or the processes that might be getting in the way? I think that all of those kinds of things can be really helpful in terms of shifting our kind of norms of behavior.
Just again, trying to decipher my handwriting, but when you were talking about the post-traumatic growth zone, and I just started scribbling comfort zone, and then you mentioned comfort zone. And one of my jobs back in the day, my boss said, look, I'm going to give you more, bite off more than you can chew, and you're going to have to chew like to succeed in this role, and because I have faith in you. And that was one of the best roles I've ever had going in. I know it's going to be hard, beyond where I should be being paid now, but I worked hard and I achieved more and learnt more. So it was really starting to go, there's a term for this, this out of the comfort zone. Is there like an optimum amount of time if you could do that, create a time limit on being in this zone on a work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think there's there isn't research that I know of. I'll look for it. There isn't research I know on the optimal amount of time, but I think it's almost like a proportion of your energy that you're spending. And so it might be like a 70-30, like, 70% of the time you're feeling like you have important things to do, right? Like we don't always have to be learning to ski, but if we feel like 70% of the time we've got important things to do, that's actually really, really helpful. And I think it's important to say nobody's going to choose trauma. Like this isn't toxic positivity where we say, oh, good, something terrible happened. But I think we can take from difficult times important learning. I think another way to think about it that's really helpful is what you're in control of and what you're not. Like sometimes the difficulty is something that's out of your control. Sometimes it's within your control. Like, oh my gosh, I set myself out on this really tough hike. And so you want to make sure that you're making choices that are constructive for you, because your level of discomfort or pushing yourself out of your comfort zone might be really different than mine. And so I think we also need to be super respectful of each other and ourselves in terms of what our comfort zone is.
So putting that back into the working environment, if you were talking with your manager about a task that you had to achieve, a project, you should have that open conversation around the constructive choices about, I don't think I can do that without X, Y, Z, or that's fine. Or so having that kind of open conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Because we can say, if it's not the right thing for you, you can say no, no for now. Or you can say not yet, or you can say no unless I have certain additional resources. You can say no with a trade-off, like yes, I can do this if we trade off this work. So we can set appropriate boundaries in a number of ways and have that open conversation about what will be meaningful to each of us in terms of stretch. My stretch might be stretching across the organization. Your stretch might be going up in the hierarchy. Somebody else's stretch might be exercising new skills and talents on a project team. So that open dialogue, just like you said, is so important.
Suzi, have you got any observations of what Tracy's been discussing just now as well? I'm interested on your take.
Yeah, I noted down that 70-30. I think that's actually really interesting because we've been having like different conversations, even like internally at Huler, at like you. Or maybe that those jobs exist, I don't know, but I personally don't feel like you can do everything that you love in the job 100% of the time to 100% of your ability. And actually that 70-30 of, okay, if you're spending 70% of your time doing the things that you love, that you're passionate about, that really give you purpose inside of that world of work, and if the other 30% of the time is other, if that's the admin stuff that you don't really enjoy doing, or tasks, or the ad hoc stuff that comes up, like I think that's a good way of sort of visualizing that for people. And also as HR leaders, it's such an easy question to ask of 70% of the time, is this job giving you, is it fulfilling you with everything that you need? And if we can push that boundary up, then absolutely fantastic. But I made a note of that because I just thought it was such an easy one to go back with, to help people sort of make sure that they're aligning their connection to what they're doing and their purpose within the organization.
Fantastic. There's so much more I'd love to discuss. I think you're talking about happiness being thinking about others is a whole other session, I think. So, and just go giving and the go giver and all that kind of those kind of elements. The 98% of Gen Z feeling burned out, I think, again, could be a whole other session on its own. The fact Tara's in a hurricane is not a good thing, but I'm not sure how we would have been able to do an hour because we've almost got to our hours, just the two of you, with a little bit of me dropped in. So is there anything you'd like to add before we finish up? Because there's been so much to take away from this, and I really appreciate both your input and your perspectives on this.
I would love to go back to something you said, Matt, that at the very beginning, empathy is not optional. I just think that's really nice. That's a really unifying idea in terms of how we navigate and how we think about tech and how we think about stress and well-being and how we think about empathizing with others and then also sharing so we can make those connections. It's a really good time to make sure that we're focused on both empathy and civility. So the timing is good.
Thank you. And yourself, Suzi?
No, I think that's just a lovely way to end. So no, it's been a really lovely conversation and time. Like I said, Matt, thanks so much for organising and bringing us together to have such a great conversation.
Well, brilliant. Thank you both. This will obviously be on demand if you're not already watching it on demand, but I really appreciate it. And what started as a bit of a shaky start today, I'm ending on a high. So thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for watching. We'll be back again with the Power Hour in 2025, actually. So whilst I batter the table. No, we'll be back in 2025. We'll have another fully packed calendar that'll be published before the end of the year, before Christmas and the holiday season. We'll have 4 ebooks with Huler have been published over the past 4 weeks that come from inspiration from our top 101 influencers. So please do check them out. All the videos from the People First Summit, our 24-hour event that happened about 3 weeks ago, on now are on demand live for you to view. I think there's about 40 different sessions from everybody around the world talking about different topics from well-being to inclusion to belonging to experience to everything you can possibly think of. So we love our mission here. We love that you are part of our community, and we'll be back trying to deliver as much value as we can for you in the new year. So for now, thank you so much and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thank you.